Hey everybody, this video is going to go over the topic determining if graphs have symmetry with respect to the x-axis, y-axis, or origin. For each graph, select all symmetries that apply. Well, for x and y-axis symmetry, all we're going to do is we're going to consider this line right here for the y-axis symmetry. Okay, so if you draw a line here and if you flipped the left side onto the right side, kind of like a mirror, it would land on top of each other. We can see that won't really actually happen, right? This point, -6, 0, would flop over and be +6, 0, right? And that's not a point on our graph. So you can think of y-axis symmetry as if the point x, y exists, okay, then if it has y-axis symmetry, then that means that the point -x, y is going to also exist on the graph. Okay, this one doesn't have it, so that doesn't have y-axis symmetry. Let's check x-axis symmetry. X-axis symmetry, very similar thing. Think of a line on the x-axis as a mirror. Do they flop over and touch each other? Well, we can rewrite this as x, y goes to x, -y. So this point right here, negative or 0, -1-ish. Do we have a point at 0, +1-ish? No, we do not have. Both of those points do not exist on our graph, so we have neither x or y, okay? Let's check origin real quick. On this one, we don't have it. But origin symmetry is when you take one side of the graph, or if you were to take the graph and rotate the whole thing 180 degrees. Okay? Then, and if the graph would land on top of itself, then you would have origin symmetry. And we'll talk about an example where that actually exists so you can see it a little better. Okay? But origin symmetry is if you have a point x, y, then that gets transferred to the point -x, -y. Okay, so let's take a look at these other two, B and C, and see if we can find their symmetries. Okay, for B, do we have x-axis symmetry? If we were to draw a line on the x-axis, would the top flop down onto the bottom? Yes, it would. It's a circle, right? So it's a semicircle on top, and it would flop down and onto the semicircle that's on bottom. Also, we have the point 2, let's do 5, 0. Actually, let's do 0, 5. That point plots down when we flop it to 0, -5. And each of these points do the same, right? They kind of flop over that x-axis. So it has x-axis symmetry. Very similarly with y-axis symmetry, okay? Draw a line here. The right side can flop onto the left or left onto the right. If we draw points, we can see -5, 1 and 5, 1 about. Those will flop onto each other. So it does have y-axis symmetry and origin symmetry. If I took this graph and I rotated it 180 degrees, which seems kind of silly, but you can imagine yourself with a ball or a circular object, and I rotate it 180 degrees, right? It's still going to land right on itself. Now that only happens because the origin is the center of the circle. Now, if the center of the circle was moved up here, we're always going to rotate it about the origin. So if we had a circle up here and we rotated it 180 degrees, it would end up down here and it would not land on itself. So it wouldn't have origin. But this one does have origin symmetry. What about this one? Well, if I drew a line on the x-axis, okay, and flopped it over, it would kind of look like this-ish. That last part was kind of poor, but it would look kind of like that. So it doesn't have x-axis symmetry. Okay, what about y-axis symmetry? Well, y-axis, I would flop, all these points would go over here. So this point would flop over to the other side. This point would flop over to this side. You see how I'm kind of making this curve? And it would look like this. So it's not lying on itself. It doesn't have y-axis symmetry. Okay, but does it have origin symmetry? Well, if I take this graph and I rotate it 180 degrees, okay, you take this half of the graph, right, and you rotate it 180 degrees, this point is going to go to here, zoom in, this point goes to here, and kind of rotate everything, and it is going to end up as lying on top of itself. So this one does have origin symmetry. So that is determining if graphs have symmetry with respect to x-axis, y-axis, or origin.